What are the key processes of innovating? Can innovating be taught and enhanced by continued practice? What are the core traits of an organization that is built to innovate? And how can government executives innovate and find new ways to lead? I'll explore these questions and more with Dr. Bensaou, author of Built to Innovate. Before we delve into specifics of your book, Built to Innovate, perhaps you could define some terms for us. What does it mean to innovate? And would you explain a distinction you draw between innovation and innovating?
Yes. I have, to tell the truth, I have noticed over the years that the word innovation as a noun often triggers anxiety and stress among employees that I'm working with. They typically think that their boss is expecting them to come up with the next blockbuster disruptive product or service, or expect them to create a totally new market space. But I noticed that this tension and fear disappears as soon as I start using the word innovating or to innovate as a verb. They kind of understand that innovating means a process. It's about some activities, a behavior, and that it can be learned and even improved with practice. And you can use some tools and techniques. So for me, innovating is simply about looking for new ideas, developing and testing them, and somewhat with no guarantee to find some good ones when you start. So another maybe analogy that can help, if innovation is the tip of an iceberg that is above the water level, what you see under the water is the collective pool of innovating capabilities of the organization. And that's what the book Built to Innovate is about, is how to create and nurture these collective capabilities.
You note in Built to Innovate that organizations must constantly succeed at two very different and seemingly contradictory activities. And you referenced execution earlier, but you juxtapose execution and innovation, and referred to them in the book, and I found this very clever, as twin engines that organizations must operate simultaneously. Can you tell us more about these engines?
The issue here is that to succeed and thrive over the long term, we're talking about doing this over the long term. So organizations and their leaders, they indeed need to constantly excel at two different, somewhat, people think contradictory activities. First, they must execute today's strategy. They must be exceedingly good at doing what they do today, designing, delivering the goods and services that the customers are expecting. And they must do that at the highest level of quality, efficiency, convenience, affordability. So this is what I would refer as the challenge of execution. And this is what I call the execution engine. So this is something that leaders everywhere spend a lifetime perfecting. But at the same time, these leaders, they must imagine the organization's future and help bring it into being. So they need to excel also at rethinking, reimagining, and improving what they're doing today, find new ways to improve the products and services, as well as create entirely new ones that no one has thought about before. And this is what I call the challenge of innovating and the function of the innovation engine. So as you can see, every organization needs to operate with both engines at the same time, working in parallel. So execution, of course, is and still stays tremendously important. And as you know, many business schools and consultants, they continue to develop and train people in execution methods. So what Built to Innovate is about is essentially the other engine, the innovating engine. This is where I explain how to build this engine. Yeah.
Ben, you note that innovating is a habit to be always practiced. and that one can innovate in everything one does. I was fascinated by that insight. Could you elaborate on it?
So now, Michael, we're talking about innovating. You remember the verb. Huh? So for me, innovating is like a muscle. The more you practice, the better you get. So just like health-conscious people who exercise or go to the gym on a regular basis, everyone in the organization should routinely be involved in some innovating activity. And I told you it can be as simple as spending 30 minutes listening to the customer, but with empathy for once. And yes, I also noticed in my research that organization can also innovate in everything they do, not only in the product and the services, but they can also innovate in their internal processes or their functions, like in HR or legal. So you may remember I talk about Kortsa, a Turkish company I worked with. So this is a supplier who manufactures fabric that is used to reinforce tires for cars. Once one of their innovation teams, they developed an idea to improve their employee onboarding and training process by simply proposing that every worker be assigned a buddy. The buddy would serve as a guide and a mentor for the worker for the first year on the job, answering any kind of questions and helping them understand the company culture, if you want. So once they implemented this system, it tremendously reduced the stress on the HR function and the trainers. I mean, they tell me it even created like several lasting partnerships. So now at Kortsa, this is an embedded process, and they call it Buddies Forever. So you see that it's just a question of looking for innovation, not only trying to disrupt the industry, but looking for large or small changes in very unexpected places. And by the way, just a side note, for those who might not know how to start their innovation training program, in chapter 10 in the book, I offer a set of simple tools and techniques to learn how to innovate. And I even describe a 7-step process methodology that an employee or a project team can use to look for new ideas. So you can think of the tools as the machines that you find in a gym. You know, when you try to strengthen your arms or your legs, you use different machines. So, and then the 7-step process methodology is like a full training program. And the bottom line here, Michael, is that if the more you practice, the better you get. And also, the better you get, the less you have to rely on the tools to innovate because they become second nature to you.
So, Ben, would you identify the 3 key processes of innovating? And perhaps you could walk us through these processes.
So the idea here is that just like an organization's execution engine, it has an execution engine as a governance structure and is driven by formal processes and has a distinct culture. So in the same way, when you build an innovating engine, it also has a governance structure. This is something I refer to as the I team. And it also has processes. I mean, I identified 3 key processes: creation, integration, and reframing. To build the innovating engine, which you remember will operate in parallel to the execution engine, everyone in the company must be engaged in these 3 processes, innovating process, in addition to their role in the execution engine. So creation is the process by which the organization continuously generates new ideas. I mean, new ideas is the raw material of innovating. So these new ideas can relate to practically any activity that the organization performs, which means that the process of creation is constantly happening in every department and division of the organization. So now, Integration is a second process in the innovating system. So this is the process by which the dispersed innovation capabilities and resources within the firm are brought together in a corporate-wide innovation capability. What is under the water, when I use the analogy of the iceberg. So you can think of integration as the process by which the organization connects the dots among the ideas that are spinning around the organization. So the connecting network may, by the way, also extend beyond the boundaries of the firm, including external innovation partners like customers, suppliers, startup companies, academic institutions, research centers. So on top of this, the integration process also includes a system that you use to evaluate, select, support, and channel the best ideas that come out of the creation process and to channel them into the execution engine. And thirdly, the reframing process is the one to prepare the future. So every organization must keep questioning its existing strategy even while it is implementing it. So continually challenging the accepted dogma, conventional orthodoxies, and the underlying shared assumption on which the execution engine is operating. This is what the reframing process is about. Now, what I discovered is that people at every level in the organization all have a contribution to make to these three processes of innovating.
What are the core traits from your research and your work of an organization that is built to innovate?
The traits actually are kind of straightforward from the BTI model, if you will. The first core trait of an organization built to innovate is its ability to inspire individual creativity and initiative in all of its people. And in the book, I describe in details how companies like Bayer or Gore, Courtside, we talked a lot about, and Starwood have developed this ability. The second trait of an organization built to innovate is its ability to link and leverage the distributed pockets of innovating activity and individual expertise across the organization by connecting frontline innovators among themselves, but also with other resources to create a process of organizational learning. And again, in the book, I explain how everyone in the organization, as I said, contributes to this integration process. And I draw observations from companies like Fiskars in Finland or Allianz in Germany and Recruit here in Japan. The third trait, I would say, is the ability to continuously question itself and challenge the shared assumptions. And here again, I have good examples that explain this, like BASF, for instance, the chemical company, or Marvel Studios, or Domino's Pizza, for instance, in the US. So the actual tools and methods and processes to carry this this transformation are, of course, different for different companies, and they, of course, need to be adapted to the unique situation of every company, every organization, I should say.
That's fascinating. Ben, I was remiss in not asking you about this example that you have in your book about Operation Tech Warrior. Can you tell us more about this example?
Oh yes. It's a very good example. I could have mentioned this one. A good example of creating a space to reduce the distance between the potential innovators and customers or users. So, this is a story about the Pentagon, and this is a program at I think the Wright State University's center. It's called the National Center for Medical Readiness. And there they can run all sorts of simulations of hazardous and dangerous, like war game situations. So they have this operation called Operation Tech Warrior, which is a series of field insertions, as they call them, where the engineers from the companies that supply the Pentagon with products and software, first they get them to go through a 2-week training, and then they get them to join a squadron, you call that, a squadron, and they go in the battlefield, and they can actually see their own products and their solutions in real life with real soldiers. So this is a fantastic example of closing the gap between the innovator and the customer by getting the innovator to literally live the life of the customer and understand physically what job they're trying to do. So this is a fantastic example for that.
Can you share some practical examples of organizations that have successfully built innovation into its DNA that you may perhaps worked for before?
Yes, I could mention quite a few, but out of the several examples of, again, I focused on established companies, as you noticed, right? Out of the several examples of established companies that have successfully built an innovating engine, I could mention Bayer, the pharmacology and life sciences global corporation based in Germany. So Bayer has a rich history of scientific achievements, and they still were able to create an innovating engine and leverage the innovating capabilities of the 100,000 people working in the company. So first, linking back to the question, the description of the I team, first they made the whole board responsible for innovation. Then they selected 80 senior managers covering all country groups and global functions to support the board as innovation ambassadors. These ambassadors then spent much of their time with middle managers, explaining, advocating, and sponsoring innovation. Then, as I described earlier, they created a formidable support structure for these middle managers. If I remember correctly, between 2016 and 2020, they trained and certified more than 1,000 innovation coaches around the world. And finally, to bring everybody into innovating, they created WeSolve. It's a digital platform where any employee can post a problem they're struggling with and invite input and ideas from anyone else across the organization. I got a chance to actually visit the website, and they tell me that at any given time, about 200 challenges, large and small, can be found on the platform. And until now, I think 40,000 Bayer employees from around the world have participated in WeSolve. By the way, they tell me that the website, I saw the website is in English, and I think they have 50,000 people who speak English in the company. So that tells you about the level of participation they're getting. So this is, as you see, this is a good example of a systematic approach to build an innovating engine and nurture the innovating capabilities of everyone in the organization.
Be sure to join us next time for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government leadership and its effectiveness. Subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app. And as always at businessofgovernment.org.